Helen Carter had lived most of her life quietly, without seeking attention or expecting anyone to notice her. At 48, she had settled into a routine that felt comfortable but empty in ways she rarely admitted. She worked at a small local office in Portland, came home to a calm but lonely apartment, and spent most evenings watching the same shows she'd watched for years. Her daughter, Emily, was the brightest part of her life, the one person who brought movement and noise into Helen's otherwise quiet days. When Emily invited her for a family dinner to celebrate her new job, Helen felt a familiar mix of pride and excitement. She always enjoyed watching her daughter's life grow in ways hers no longer did. She chose a simple navy dress that she hadn't worn in a while, the kind that made her feel presentable but not flashy. She didn't dress to impress anyone. She simply wanted to look respectful for her daughter's special night. She arrived at Emily and her husband Michael's home just as the sun was setting. The warm glow from the windows made the house look welcoming. As soon as she stepped inside, she felt the warmth of the gathering soft music, the smell of baked chicken, and the easy laughter of a young couple starting their life together. Then she saw Michael. He looked up from setting the table, and for a brief moment, he paused just long enough for Helen to feel the unexpected weight of his attention. His expression wasn't inappropriate. It was more like surprise, mixed with something she couldn't name. She knew that people sometimes notice changes in others, but this moment felt different. It wasn't the look itself, it was how long it stayed. Helen brushed it off immediately, stepping forward with a smile, hugging Emily, and letting the moment fade. Michael welcomed her politely, as he always did. He was a good man, respectful, calm, helpful, and the kind of person any mother would trust around her daughter. Helen had never once seen him behave out of line. He had always been the quiet strength behind Emily's bright, lively personality. As they sat for dinner, Helen tried to stay focused on the celebration. Emily talked excitedly about her new role at the clinic, describing her first week with enthusiasm that reminded Helen of her younger years. Michael encouraged her with supportive words, adding small comments that showed he paid attention to the details of her work. He wasn't a loud presence, but he was steady. During the meal, Helen noticed something she had never paid attention to before. Whenever she spoke, Michael looked at her with full attention. He nodded at her stories, reacted before Emily did, and noticed every small thing she needed. When her glass emptied, he refilled it. When she shifted in her chair, he adjusted the placement for her. When she mentioned feeling a little cold, he immediately offered his jacket. His gestures were polite, almost too thoughtful. Helen didn't feel flattered. Instead, she felt uneasy, not because the actions were wrong, but because they were unexpected. She had spent years feeling unseen, blending into the background without needing more. Having someone, especially someone tied to her daughter, focus on her so closely felt like a sudden spotlight she didn't know how to stand under. Still, the evening went smoothly. Emily was cheerful, and Michael was helpful in the kitchen afterward. Helen stayed busy cleaning, chatting, and reminding herself that everything was normal. Yet every now and then, her mind returned to that first moment at the door to pause. The slight surprise, the eyes that lingered a second too long, when dinner ended. Emily hugged her mother the way she always did, warm and affectionate. Michael thanked Helen for coming, smiling in a way that felt sincere. Nothing about the farewell was strange. But Helen couldn't shake the feeling that something important had shifted, not between Michael and Emily, but inside herself. On her drive home, the streets of Portland glistened with the soft glow of streetlights. Helen kept replaying the evening in her head. She wasn't imagining things. She had learned long ago how to sense subtle changes in people, and tonight there had been one. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't inappropriate. But it was personal, and that made it powerful. She tried to convince herself that she was overthinking. Humans notice each other sometimes, even when they don't mean to. Maybe Michael had simply been surprised to see her dressed up. Maybe he admired her for raising a daughter, like Emily. Maybe the attention she felt was nothing more than kindness. But deep down, Helen knew it was more than that. It wasn't about Michael. It was about the reminder she had long ignored that she still had a presence. A woman's presence, one that could be seen even when she didn't try. It had been years since someone had looked at her with curiosity or interest, even in the smallest, simplest way. That single moment opened a part of her she had kept closed for too long. The quiet part that still wanted to matter. The soft part that still wanted to be looked at. The forgotten part that still wanted to feel alive. By the time she reached home, the night had grown still. Helen stood at her doorway, holding her keys in her hand, thinking about the strange shift in the air. She didn't want anything to change. She didn't want complications. She didn't want to feel what she felt because it wasn't something she could act on. It wasn't a path she could walk. But that didn't stop the feeling. She whispered to herself that everything was fine. That she was making too much of a simple glance. She told herself that she was imagining a moment that wasn't real. Yet her heart had already accepted the truth. Something had awakened. Something she hadn't felt in years, and whether she liked it or not. That one unexpected look had changed everything inside her quietly, deeply, and in a way she could not undo. The morning after the dinner, Helen woke up with a strange heaviness she couldn't name. Nothing dramatic had happened the night before, and yet something inside her felt unsettled. She made coffee like she always did, stood by her kitchen window, and tried to focus on her plans for the day. But instead, her mind kept drifting back to Michael's look, that small, unexpected pause that had shaken her in a way she didn't understand. Helen wasn't a woman who lived for attention. She had spent most of her adult life keeping things steady and simple. After her divorce 10 years earlier, she told herself she didn't need romance or anything close to it. She had responsibilities, a demanding job, bills to handle, and aging parents to support. She had raised Emily mostly on her own, and in the process, she had pushed her own emotional needs far behind everything else. But that morning, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, the sense of being noticed. She didn't want it to mean anything. She didn't want to entertain the thought. Yet it lingered quietly at the back of her mind, nudging her with questions she didn't want to ask. For the next few days, Helen tried to distract herself. She worked extra hours, organized old boxes in her closet, cooked new recipes, stayed out of the house as much as possible. But whenever she slowed down, her thoughts returned to the same place. Not to Michael as a man she wanted, that wasn't it, but to the unexpected reminder that she could still be seen as a woman. Not just someone's mother, coworker, or neighbor. One afternoon, her phone buzzed. It was Emily. "Mom, can you come over tomorrow? We're moving the new couch in, and I really need help setting up the living room." Helen agreed instantly. She always helped when her daughter needed her. But a small, uneasy feeling settled in her stomach. She told herself it was nothing. The next day, Helen drove to their house, telling herself to be calm. She arrived with her usual smile, but the moment Emily opened the door, she looked flustered. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I just got called in for a last-minute shift. Michael's already home. Can you stay and help him? I promise I'll make it up to you later." Before Helen could answer, Emily was already grabbing her bag and rushing out. The door closed behind her, leaving Helen standing in the quiet hallway, alone with the very situation she had been trying to avoid. She took a deep breath and stepped. Inside, Michael was in the living room, struggling to move the new couch. When he turned and saw her, a warm smile spread across his face. The kind that made people feel welcome without even trying. "Helen, thank you for coming. I didn't think you'd get here so fast." "I live close," she said lightly. "Let's just get this done so Emily can come home to a nice surprise." They worked together, moving furniture, adjusting placements, and debating where the plants should go. The work was simple, but the silence between them carried a quiet tension Helen couldn't ignore. She tried to focus on the tasks, but every now and then, she caught Michael watching her, not in a wrong way, but in a thoughtful, too aware way. As they rearranged a lamp, he suddenly spoke, his voice soft. "Helen, I never got the chance to say this properly, but you looked really beautiful the other night." Helen froze for a moment. She wasn't used to compliments, especially not from someone so close to her daughter's life. She forced a polite smile, hoping to brush off the comment quickly. "Michael, you're being too kind. I'm sure I just look like myself." No, he said gently, shaking his head. You looked different, happier, confident, I noticed. The honesty in his voice struck her. It wasn't flirtation. It was sincerity. But that only made it harder to digest. Helen stepped back, needing space from the moment. You don't have to say things like that, really. It's okay. Not trying to cross any line, he said quickly. I just think you deserve to hear nice things sometimes. You do so much for everyone. His words were simple, kind, innocent, yet they reached a place in her heart she had locked away years ago. Helen didn't know how to respond. She didn't want to encourage anything, but she also couldn't bring herself to shut down the kindness completely. Instead, she picked up a cushion and placed it on the couch. Pretending to be busy, we should finish before Emily gets home, she said quietly. Michael nodded, understanding everything she didn't say. The rest of the time passed quickly, both of them keeping to safe topics, work, movies, weekend plans. When Emily called to ask if they could pick her up later, the moment instantly broke apart. Helen felt relief wash over her. She needed distance from this feeling, from the confusion growing inside her without permission. They drove to pick up Emily, keeping the conversation neutral and light. When Emily got into the car, cheerful and full of stories from her shift, Helen felt herself breathing easier. The natural balance returned the moment Emily spoke. Michael was once again the attentive husband, and Helen was the supportive mother. But underneath the everyday normalcy, a truth pulsed quietly. Something had begun, not something dangerous, not something planned, just a small shift in how they saw each other. Helen never wanted anything from Michael. She loved her daughter too much to let a single thought drift into the wrong place. But even without wanting it, she couldn't erase the unexpected emotional pull, the sense that someone had seen her clearly, and she hadn't seen herself in years. When she drove home that night, the city lights passing by her window, she felt tangled between guilt and gratitude. She wasn't falling for him. She wasn't imagining a future. She simply felt human again, noticed, valued, gently reminded that she still had a heart that could respond to kindness. She whispered to herself, "This can't happen. It's just a moment. It means nothing." But deep down, she knew it meant something. Not about Michael, but about her. A part of her had woken up. A part she didn't know how to silence, and that was the beginning of her confusion. The start of a quiet, emotional storm she never expected to face at this stage of her life. The rain in Portland had a way of swallowing sound and slowing the world down. And on that particular evening, the storm arrived fast and heavy. Helen was finishing dinner alone when her phone buzzed. It was Michael. She hesitated before answering, surprised to see his name so late. But worry pushed her to pick up. His voice was tense, but steady. "Helen, I'm sorry to bother you. My car broke down. I'm stuck near the old bookstore on Maple Street. Emily's out of town. You're the closest person I could think of." Helen felt a sudden rush of concern. Not excitement, not anything romantic. Just the immediate instinct to help someone she cared about. She grabbed her keys, slipped on a jacket, and drove out into the rain. When she arrived, she found Michael sitting on the curb, soaked from the downpour. The streetlight above flickered against the dark sky, making him look even more tired than usual. Helen hurried out of her car and handed him a dry sweater she kept in the back seat. "You'll get sick sitting like that," she said, urging him into the car. He thanked her quietly. The kind of thank you people give when they're too tired to dress it up. The drive back to her place was short. But the rain was so heavy it felt longer. Neither of them spoke much. Helen focused on the road, while Michael leaned back, breathing slowly, trying to shake off the stress. And when they reached her home, she led him inside, still moving fast, trying to keep the evening practical and simple. She gave him towels, turned on the heater, and made a cup of tea. Everything she did was natural. Not intimate, just kindness from one adult to another, but even simple acts carry weight when emotions have been stirred for weeks. As Michael sat at her dining table with the tea in his hands, the silence deepened. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't light either. Helen could feel the tension between them, a quiet, unspoken awareness, neither wanted but both understood. Finally, Michael broke the silence. "I'm sorry for calling you," he said softly. "I just didn't know who else to reach out to." "You don't have to explain," she replied. "Emily trusts me, and I trust you. It's just a rough night." He nodded, looking down at his mug. "You always know the right thing to say." Helen sat across from him, trying to stay calm. She didn't want this moment to turn into something emotional, but it felt like the room had its own direction. After a few moments, he spoke again, quieter this time. "I hope I haven't made you uncomfortable these past weeks." The question hit Helen harder than she expected. He wasn't pretending nothing had happened. He wasn't ignoring the strange shift between them. He was acknowledging it gently, respectfully, as if he was trying to protect her feelings. Helen took a breath. "You haven't done anything wrong, Michael. But we both know things have felt different." He met her eyes, and there was honesty there. Not desire, not hidden intentions. Just vulnerability. "I never meant to make things complicated," he said. "You're just easy to talk to. You understand people in a way that's rare. Sometimes I feel like you see the things others don't." His words were simple, but they carried emotion. Not romantic emotion, human emotion. The kind that grows in quiet spaces when two people feel unheard and different. Parts of their lives. Helen felt her chest tighten. Not because she wanted more from him, she didn't. But because kindness was something she hadn't let herself feel for a long time. "Michael," she said softly, "you're my daughter's husband. Whatever this is, we need to make sure it stays in the right place." "I know that," he whispered. "Believe me, I do." For a moment, their eyes stayed locked. Not in longing, but in understanding. Two people who had wandered too close to the edge of an emotional line without meaning to. Outside, storm softened, the heavy rain turning into a light drizzle. The sound of it tapping against the windows filled the room, creating a quiet rhythm that made the moment feel heavier. Michael finally stood up. "I should call a tow truck in the morning. I don't want to overstay." "You're not overstaying," Helen said gently. "But maybe it's best if we keep some distance for a little while. Just so things stay clear." He nodded again, this time with a look of regret. Not because he wanted anything more, but because he knew she was right before either of them could say another word. Helen's phone rang. Emily, her bright voice echoed through the speaker. "Mom, Michael. Are you guys okay? The storm is crazy right now." In that single moment, everything snapped back to reality. Michael straightened his posture, and Helen's heart steadied. Emily's voice, cheerful and unaware, reminded them of the truth they both needed to hold on to. They assured her everything was fine. They kept their voices calm and normal. They let the moment dissolve into the ordinary rhythm of their family roles. When Helen hung up, the atmosphere between them had already changed. The emotional tension had softened, replaced with clarity and a quiet hint of discomfort. Michael thanked her again, more formally this time. "You're a good person, Helen. I won't forget tonight." She didn't know how to answer, so she simply nodded. He gathered his things, and she arranged a blanket for him on the couch. It wasn't romantic, just practical. Just safe. As Helen went to her room and closed the door, she leaned against it for a moment, breathing out slowly. Tonight could have become something complicated, something dangerous, something neither of them asked for. But instead, it became a moment of truth, a quiet confession of loneliness, a reminder of emotional boundaries, a storm inside two hearts that needed to pass. Helen lay in bed listening to the soft rain outside. The events of the night replayed in her mind, not because she wanted more, but because it reminded her that she was still human, still capable of connection, still vulnerable in ways she had forgotten. As she closed her eyes, she whispered a quiet promise to herself. This has to end here, for everyone's sake. But deep inside, she knew the night had changed things. Not in the wrong way, but in a way she would carry with her. A reminder of the delicate balance between kindness and emotion, between longing and responsibility. And as the storm faded outside, the storm inside her quietly settled. But it didn't disappear completely. After the rainy evening that had left Helen and Michael quietly aware of the subtle connection between them, life slowly returned to normal. Yet the memory of that night lingered in Helen's mind, like a shadow she couldn't shake. She realized she had to make a conscious choice. This feeling, no matter how gentle or flattering, could not grow into something that might hurt Emily or disrupt her family. Helen was a mother first, a protector of her daughter's happiness. The awareness of her own heart stirring was not forbidden, but it was dangerous if left unchecked. She understood that boundaries were the only way forward. In the weeks that followed, Helen began to create distance. She declined casual visits to Michael and Emily's home unless Emily specifically asked. She kept her interactions polite and warm. But she stopped lingering in ways that might give Michael a chance to see her in a different light. Helen felt a quiet ache from this restraint, a subtle loss of the small connection she had discovered. But she also recognized it as a necessary step. Her life had become centered on responsibility for so long, and she had almost forgotten that self-respect sometimes meant stepping back, even from people who seemed to understand her best. Michael noticed the change immediately, but he did not react in anger or confusion. He simply adjusted. He continued being kind to Helen, greeting her warmly, listening to her, and treating her with the respect she deserved. But he made sure his attentiveness never crossed the line. Helen admired him silently for his self-control. He had a rare combination of sincerity and decency. The kind of man whose goodness made her momentary feelings feel both safe and impossible. Every smile, every gesture of kindness was gentle, carefully measured, almost as if he too understood that this delicate bond needed boundaries to survive without harm. Helen also threw herself into activities that reminded her of her own life outside her family. She joined a painting class at a local studio, meeting people around her age who shared her interests. The smell of fresh paint and the sound of brushes on canvas made her feel alive in ways she hadn't felt in years. She began attending a book club, discussing novels and stories, and reconnecting with old friends she had neglected. These activities didn't erase the memory of Michael's attention, but they gave her a healthier focus. She realized that the feelings she had experienced weren't about longing for romance, but about remembering her own worth. One afternoon, Helen visited the local cafe, carrying her sketchbook. She noticed Michael at the table with Emily, laughing quietly at something her daughter said. Her chest tightened briefly, the familiar pang of emotion. But she reminded herself that this was exactly where things needed to stay. Joyful, familial, safe. She approached, smiling politely, and joined them for a short conversation. There was no lingering glance this time, no awkward pause. Just the simple warmth of a mother-in-law and her son-in-law sharing a moment with her daughter. Helen felt a wave of relief. The natural balance she had been striving to maintain was finally returning. Over the next few months, Ali announced she was expecting her first child. Helen's heart swelled with excitement and joy. She visited the hospital for the first checkup. Michael proudly holding Emily's hand, and the couple radiated a sense of partnership and shared happiness. Helen watched them from a distance, marveling at their connection. She felt no pangs of longing or sadness this time, only a deep appreciation for the life her daughter had built. Michael remained the devoted husband, the caring partner, the man who had once unintentionally stirred emotions in her, now firmly rooted in the role she had always trusted him to occupy. Helen's understanding of the past few months deepened. She realized that the fleeting moments with Michael had not been about forbidden attraction or temptation. They had been about recognition, a gentle reminder that she was still human, still visible, still capable of feeling deeply. That awareness had been both beautiful and dangerous, and it had required courage to step back. In choosing restraint, she honored not only herself but also her daughter and the integrity of their family. This was not defeat. It was wisdom. Helen also noticed subtle changes in herself. She no longer waited for validation from others. She no longer lingered on fleeting glances or small compliments. Her confidence grew quietly, rooted in her own understanding of her worth. When she met new people at her painting class or book club, she approached them without fear or hesitation, free from the weight of unspoken longing. She laughed more openly, spoke more freely, and felt a sense of peace that had been absent from her life for far too long. The storm of emotions she had experienced with Michael had passed. Leaving behind a calm clarity, one evening Helen sat by her window, sipping tea as the city lights of Portland glimmered in the distance. She reflected on the months gone by and realized that she had learned something important. Life sometimes brings unexpected moments that stir feelings we do not anticipate. And it is the choices we make in those moments that define our character. She had felt recognition, admiration, and even a touch of longing, but she had chosen restraint, grace, and integrity. That choice had given her peace. The next day, Helen received a photo from Emily, a sonogram of her unborn child. Tears welled in Helen's eyes, not from longing or confusion, but from pure, unfiltered joy. She sent a message back with her congratulations and a promise to be there for every step of the journey. Michael responded as well, thanking her for always supporting the family. Their exchange was polite, warm, and completely free of ambiguity. Helen realized that this was how relationships should be, grounded in love, respect, and boundaries. Helen continued to nurture her own life alongside her family responsibilities. She spent weekends exploring Portland's parks, joined community workshops, and reconnected with friends she had lost touch with over the years. She rediscovered the satisfaction of personal growth, learning, and joy. Michael remained a respectful presence in her life, never too close, never too distant. Simply a man who had once reminded her that she mattered, now firmly anchored in his role as her daughter's husband. Helen no longer feared the memory of that night. Instead, she carried it as a quiet lesson about emotional honesty and the importance of self-respect. Over time, Helen realized that her feelings for Michael had never been romantic in the true sense. They had been a gentle awakening, a reminder that her heart was still capable of responding to kindness and attention. She had learned to accept those feelings without acting on them, to hold them lightly without letting them control her. That understanding brought her a sense of freedom she hadn't known for years. She had reclaimed herself, her emotions, and her dignity, and in doing so, she had strengthened her relationship with her daughter and her family. As the months passed, Helen sometimes thought of that rainy night and the subtle connection she had felt with Michael. She smiled quietly, knowing it was a memory she could cherish without guilt or confusion. It had been a moment of awakening, but not a turning point that required action. She had let it pass gracefully, and in doing so, she had preserved love, respect, and harmony within her family. Helen understood now that true emotional strength often comes from letting go, even when the feelings are profound and real. Finally, one evening, as she prepared dinner alone in her apartment, Helen reflected on the journey. She whispered to herself, "I still have a heart, and someday, someone meant for me will look at me with the same kindness and understanding." There was no sadness in her voice, only hope and quiet contentment. She had learned that life's most beautiful moments are often those in which we act with grace, integrity, and self-awareness. And sometimes the most powerful love is the love we hold for ourselves. The story ended not with romance, not with drama, but with growth, grace, and quiet strength. Helen had discovered that her value did not depend on others' attention or admiration. She had chosen honor over fleeting feelings, wisdom over temptation, and family over fleeting emotion. In doing so, she became not only a better mother, but also a stronger, more complete woman. And in that completeness, she found a peace that no momentary glance or fleeting emotion could ever disturb again.